Do people bring in fresh fish every morning? Do they sit in high-rise buildings, or do they spend afternoons together and talk about nothing or dream about something? Do they run through sprinklers in the summer or sit and drink hot things by the fireplace?
We all have assumptions. Before I came to the U.S. eight years ago, I thought like, oh, I'm eating McDonald's, so everybody in the U.S. must be rich. Ooh. So I think we gotta talk, tell the stories. Telling the stories is such an important thing.
She walked slowly, deeply into that water, and when finally her head dissolved, she said, now I know who I am.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening on the second anniversary of the terrible catastrophe, the triple meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants, and the great tsunami where over 20,000 lives were lost. By the way, my name is Linda Seeley, and I'm on the board of the San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace, and the Mothers for Peace are the people who are hosting this event this evening at the Steinberg Gallery in San Luis Obispo. And Peter Steinberg has been very kind in offering his space to us to commemorate this tragic anniversary. So I'm here with Zette Harbour, who is a storyteller extraordinaire and the creator of the 1,000 Paper Cranes sculpture. And I'm going to talk to her about the 1,000 Paper Cranes this evening. So.
Thank you, Linda. It's very exciting to be here. And it's exciting to bring the sculpture out and let people see it again and to experience it. To reach people who probably haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's when you see it, it's very stunning. It's very, not only beautiful, but because each one is different, it reminds us about how different each person is and how precious each life is. And so and each one of them is handmade. And so the experience is really astounding to having taken part in it myself. But I want to ask you a few questions, Zette. Why? Why cranes?
Well, let's see, I guess last year in April, I was at a Montessori United Nations conference with my daughter. She was participating as a delegate from Haiti, and they were discussing issues that were very real and very important around the world, and they learned a lot. And what I noticed was the kids each would come up with ideas for resolutions, but many of those resolutions didn't take into account that every culture has a story. And the story is what creates the situation. And so it's when you aren't able to understand one another's story, you aren't able to live alongside another's story, that makes peace impossible. So it inspired me. I was working on a storytelling festival, and it inspired me to call the festival the Peace, Love, Story Fest. And as part of growing people's awareness about peace beginning really within you, and that peace worldwide was an important goal, I decided to teach as many people as possible how to fold origami cranes. And this is what you see.
And why cranes? Why origami cranes?
Well, there's a wonderful tradition, Japanese tradition, that when you fold a crane, you are basically folding your wish into it. And I'm paraphrasing now, but the crane represents whatever your wish is. If you fold 1,000, your wish is supposed to come true. And so each person folding this crane held in their mind their wish for peace. And so these cranes actually represent each individual's wish for peace.
That's powerful. It really is. Who made them?
Well, there are 225 folks on my list. We've got wonderful people from all over the county, all age groups. We have school children. The Mothers for Peace participated. I had groups such as Old Edna out on Broad. So people from all around the county.
I remember when I did it, when you came to our Mothers for Peace meeting and we sat, and it was quite an experience because it isn't easy to fold a paper crane, and you taught us how to do it. But we got into a place of being very quiet while we were there, and everybody was really concentrating on folding their crane and writing. I wrote a wish inside of mine. I don't know, did a lot of people do that?
Well, what I asked people to do was write their name inside the crane, because the crane then became their physical representation of their wish for peace. If they wanted to also then write what their wish for peace was, then they were free to do that. But in my idea for it was simply that these cranes would become the manifestation of their wish for peace, whether they wrote it or not, because each one has a name of a person.
And how did you decide whom to ask to do this?
Well, I started just by asking friends, you know, who had businesses. WizKids was one of the first ones to jump on board and host a crane folding party. The studios up at the park hosted another. So it actually wasn't difficult to find people to host them. And then we would collaborate to invite guests. And we had as few as 4 at a folding and as many as 60, depending.
Wow. Yeah. And one last question that I want to ask you is, as a storyteller, how has Fukushima affected you?
You know, it does bring me back to that original idea that the story is the most powerful way for us to impact others, to share and move them to make contributions to our situation. And one of the things that is definitely missing is that we're not hearing the stories of Fukushima. We don't really hear the stories of the individuals. I think most of us, if we think of Fukushima at all, think of it as something happened over there kind of a feeling. And we know that when we connect to individual stories and we see the faces of the people and we hear how they feel about what's happening, that then we are actually moved to make choices, to create solutions for them, to go out of our way to be a part of that.
Oh, thank you so much, Zette. We so appreciate your coming here tonight and you will be telling us a story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Linda.
Zette.
Yeah, good to see you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to update you a little bit about Fukushima or Japan. So it happened in 2011, but you know, it doesn't mean that there's no movement before 2011. Before 2011, there were a lot of resistance in Yamaguchi that is closer to Hiroshima. People were kayaking against the new constructions of Iwaijima and Kaminoseki Genpatsu, Kaminoseki reactors. And you know, young folks are just blocking so much, and they're beaten up, and you know, they were having a hard time. That happened. One of the biggest protests that is broadcasted happened on February 22nd on 2011. So I wasn't foreseeing that the anti-nuclear movement was going, you know, bad. I thought that, oh, this is going to be our chance to go on against the nuclear. And Ibaraki has the first reactor in Japan, Tokai Village. It's a kind of experimental reactor, and people from Ibaraki Prefecture sing it in their kind of anthem, and they are really proud of it, actually. And we have so much leaks, and I'm not going to talk about it. So 2011 was, nothing new, but it was new, and after the accident, we have so much goals that are shifting. And to summarize, I feel like the goals of the 2011 was to shut down all the reactors. All the reactors means 54 reactors. And I was reading a report from 1981 conference amongst people who are religious. And people from Hawaii was reporting about, Vic Hummert was reporting about that the US is trying to put 33 nuclear reactors in Japan. So he came over to Japan and warned us. People like Black Elk came over and warned us, like, don't have it. But we have it. When I grew up, I was born in 1981. By the time at 1989, there was about like 37, and now it's 54. So in 2011, shutting down all the reactor was the goal number 1. And 2, evacuate all the people from Fukushima and affected areas. And 3, compensation to all the workers. That was, that were the goals. And also the monitoring of the radiation and an air was their first goals. Mothers and parents stood up. They started monitoring the breastfed milks first because the government does not do that. And they said it's okay to be exposed to the 20 millisieverts of radiation externally per year, and we stick with, what our movement has been saying. 1 millisieverts per year is the extent that we can go on for that. So no 20 millisieverts per year. So mothers rush to the city halls carrying the soil that is contaminated in their sandbox in the kindergarten and said, lick the soil. Maybe you have seen in some of the movies. Mothers rushed to the Ministry of Education. Fathers sneaked into the kindergarten and said, like, hey, it is not the safe. If you tell me that it's safe, lick the soil. If you can't do that. And the government and institution just fell in silence. And evacuation, this was not implemented by the government. So people self-evacuated. As Linda says, 160,000 people by the end of July 2011 have evacuated. And by that time, radiation was not really not monitored, but it is said, allegedly, according to the concerned scientists all over the world, it says like 168 A-bombs worth of radiation was released. And at this time, like TEPCO was not admitting that they were releasing this to the ocean and to the air. And yeah. And by 2012, of course, like maybe you heard about the May 5th, and by May 5th, temporarily all the nukes were shut down, and we had the moment of peace in that way. But our goals has changed with this shifting government, not restart all of them and evacuate everybody while the government was cutting down all the funds. And people who are homeless or people who are evacuating became 320,000, doubled. And if you can compare with the people who escaped with the Underground Railroad, for example, it is a tremendous amount of number, but it's not officially counted. And I know so many people in Tokyo who evacuate only for the weekend. It's not entire evacuation, but people want to take 2 days, 3 days off because they are hurt inside. Psychologically, they're hurt. And also kids have thyroid cysts and other symptoms. People are very stressed out because there's such a lot of earthquakes. If you were in Ibaraki, for example, you have like magnitude 4, like 3 times a week still. So it's about, okay, today you see a crack in your bathtub, and a week later the bathtub is gone. What are you going to do about it? Your basic needs. And you're trapped by this thinking that you want your daily lives back. And so it's very stressful that people really can't think through it. So I don't know that the central government is really using this like a shock. So they implement, since 2011, they did 2 things for us. One is to share the fear and the grief of the people in Fukushima and disaster-stricken areas. Therefore, we should incinerate all the rubbles, could be radioactive and other contaminated rubbles, all over Japan, and eat the food products to support the fishery and agricultural farmers. There are people who really believe in that, and people who really, it's a coping method, especially people in urban places. They eat a lot. And one example is that watermelons from Ibaraki used to be very, very expensive, or melons, $30 for a piece. That was a lot. But now it's like $5 or something like that. And if you're a working class person who goes to either to 7-Eleven or to the supermarket, and if you try to buy something that is cheap, you get to eat those. So class divide, there is a class divide. I can talk like on and on about this. But I also want to talk about the resistance part. You know, like it's not like a lot of people say like, oh, such and such people in northeast part of Japan is known as the people for like resilient but the silent or something, but it's not true. They are, of course, you have seen like a marching down and mass protest last year. It's called the Hydrangea Revolution, and they're like, you know, 200,000 people or like a more gathering, and they're doing like weekly protest. And you can see the bird's eye pictures, and I have been back in Japan since October to December last year, so I saw people. Maybe I don't know how else to explain, but it's like the people are just like so much. You can't really see the whole picture. You're just there, and it's just like going under your garden and looking at the back of the leaves. There's so much bugs. There's so many that you can't capture from the bird-eye view photos. There's so many people that you can't even count. The media and the government try to minimize it, but they do that. They do that kind of protest. And I said that Japan and the US are similar, but one of the things that I have to say is that if you were detained in Japan, then you can be detained without any charges for 23 days. And it can be extended to 75 days. That means that you are really risking a lot by going into the protest. So that's the damage. Or like even this much of like water paint can cost $7. So who can make that Mothers for Peace banner, for example? It requires at least like more than one paint, you know? So like people are detached from the means to resist or self-expression in the first place. That's how the capitalism takes over. So please understand that's the kind of differences that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Umi. I wanted to mention was something that Umi and I had talked about yesterday, which is that there's unimaginable amounts of radioactivity coming out of Fukushima, out of all 3 units that melted down. They can't even get close enough to figure it out how much radioactivity is coming up because it's so hot that if they try to send, no human can go, and they've tried to send in robots, and the robots can't do it either because the radioactivity disables them. So we don't know what's going on, and we do know that there's millions and millions and billions and quadrillions of gallons of water that are contaminated with radioactivity that are going into the Pacific Ocean every single day. And it's not stopping. It's not over. Fukushima isn't something that happened. It's something that's happening. As Jane said, please go to, you do not have to be on Facebook to go to Mothers for Peace Facebook page. We post a tremendous amount of information on there from all over the world. It's not just our stuff. It's a treasure trove of information if you're interested in what's going on with in the nuclear world around everywhere. There were protests in Mongolia on the anniversary of Fukushima in Paris, in Spain, in Morocco, in Israel, all sorts of places there were protests, but you'll never see that in the news. You have to go to a source like the Mothers for Peace Facebook page. It's funny that it would be Facebook that would be the source for such a thing, but it's...
Yeah, I'd love to tell you a little bit about the cranes, and then I've got a few short stories for you. This is a 1,000 crane peace sculpture that our community created last summer. It is, the idea that I had was that it would be a great way for people to become aware that peace requires a powerful story. And if you have a story, and we all do, about who we are, I'm Zette Harbour, I'm a storyteller, I'm a peacemaker, I'm whatever else. Every day that I wake up, I don't have to think to myself, now, how am I going to do that storytelling thing? It's just who I am. And so by folding these cranes and engaging in this process, I try to just get people to realize that if they put that one sentence into the story of who they are, I'm I'm Linda Seeley, I'm Peacemaker, then every day you wake up and that's just who you will be. You don't have to work at it. I wonder too if anyone, you probably know of her, I'm sure, Scylla Elworthy. I always get her flipped. Oh, she's fabulous. She's on TED, and we should send that link too. She has a wonderful TED Talk about how to deal with a bully without becoming a thug. It is the best advice I've ever gotten. And she inspires this story for me. This story is actually a Buddhist tale. And there was a young Buddhist monk, a woman, and she was studying the meditation of loving kindness. And anyone here practicing Buddhism? So when I botch this part, you've just, okay. But as I understand it. So she would go in her cell and every day would spend her time filling her heart with loving kindness for all beings. And she grew in her practice day by day. And she was sure that she was, blossoming into an effective meditator. But there was this one problem. She would go down to the marketplace, and there was this one merchant. Oh, he was just rude. He would pinch her, and he'd grab her, and he'd pull her over, and he'd even try to kiss her once. And she would just get so furious with him. She had no loving kindness for him whatsoever. But then she'd return to her cell and think, okay, I have to have loving kindness. And she would practice really hard. But it just finally came to the day where she couldn't take it anymore. And he pinched her just one too many times. She raised up her umbrella and she was about to smack him over the head when her eye caught the eye of her teacher across the street. She was mortified. She walked over and she stood there just waiting for the rebuke she knew was going to come. And he looked at her. Here is what you must do. Next time you meet that fellow, fill your heart with feelings of loving kindness toward him. Then raise your umbrella and hit him over the head. And so when I thought to myself, what can I say here tonight? That's what I want each of you to take with you. The way to truly succeed, the way to truly overcome will never be through anger and hatred. But we must fill our hearts with loving kindness and raise that umbrella, hit them over the head so hard that they never think of building another one of these ever again, right? Thank you. And she could just feel the waves calling to her, so she walked slowly into the water, and she put her one foot in the water, and she knew she had found where she belonged. So she walked slowly, deeply into that water, and when finally her head dissolved, she said, now I know who I am. And for me, the big reason that story is appropriate is I started studying Transcendental Meditation last July, and my teacher says, it's like being a wave. So each one of us is a wave, and we're riding along in the ocean. And you look over there and you see another wave, and you think, wow, that's a cool wave, or wow, I don't like that wave. But it's a different wave from you. But you say to yourself, and we're both ocean. And so when I hear, how can we help the Japanese people who have suffered, or the others who are there? We can't. But we must know that they are ocean just like we are. And you work inside here, and you will heal everywhere around you. So whatever else you do outside of that, always be sure you're in here. And so, for the last and final thing, I'd like you all to stand up. Because I have a Nasrudin story, and anyone here know who Nasrudin is? Ah, excellent. So Nasrudin is a Hoja. He is a wise Sufi who's a complete idiot. No, he's a wise Hoja who's a complete idiot, really. So it came upon him that there were a group of followers who wanted him to be their spiritual leader, and they wanted him to teach them enlightenment. And so they would meet him once a week at the marketplace, and he had to teach them something. So he finally came upon this idea that he would do some actions and they would repeat them. And so everyone's going to do that. So it's going to be like, And so, Nasruddin was carrying on like this week after week, and a friend of his had just come back to town, and he saw this crazy spectacle, and he said, "What is going on?" "Well, these are my followers. I must teach them enlightenment. I'm their spiritual guide." And he says, "Well, how do you know they've been enlightened?" "Well, I count them, and the ones that don't come back, I know they're enlightened." And so you've been enlightened, and now you can go. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Zette. You didn't tell us about the paper cranes. Would you mind?
So there is a list of folks right there hanging on the side. It's about 225 community members, and each person was asked to write their name inside the crane, but also to, if they wish, to write their wish for peace, and that the crane itself became the physical manifestation of their personal commitment and desire for peace. So what we have here is truly a living sculpture. It embodies the wishes of all those people to actually bring peace into the world. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the person that spoke first, because I think you started something. My name's Tony Criscolo, and I just had a thought while I was sitting back there. I came late because I had a class, and I rushed over as soon as I could. But some years ago, when I first moved to SLO, I was invited by this group called RAM, Retired Active Men. I know. To give a talk to them about yoga. I'm a yoga teacher. And during the luncheon, I was sitting next to a man who was an oil executive, retired, for a small oil company. And I thought, this is an opportunity to talk to him about, you know, what the oil business is up to. And I asked him about Exxon Valdez. And he said, "Oh yeah, we know about things like that. We budget for it. That is, we know there's going to be a certain amount of spillage, you know, over a certain amount of years, and there's going to be lawsuits, and our attorneys are going to handle it for years and years and years, and that's just how it is." Okay. So I kind of just noted that. And when I was sitting back there, I thought, you know, nuclear disasters like Fukushima, at some higher level, is budgeted for. You know, and the people that budget for it have children and grandchildren coming, and they don't realize what they're doing. So I can't imagine that all the major corporate executives in the world are heartless and fools. So I think there's some opportunity whenever we can to reach those people, and to reach them not with anger, but with love and heart, and appeal to their hearts. So anyhow, that's what I have to say. And thanks for your time.